come on up. Yeah. Sure, yeah, please, yeah.
Okay. So this is very rarely that I would be asked to kick off an event. My name is Lee. I lead the World Bank's engagement with civil society organizations. So this week you will see me a lot if you haven't done so yet. So it's my pleasure to kick off this session. The reason I am very happy to do this is because, for the CSPF process, we have a very lengthy and very rigorous process to select the proposals which would actually make the program you see today. So for this cycle, when we launched the proposal, call for proposal in July, the first week of July, so we opened it for 7 weeks, and we received a record number of 300 proposals. And so that gave our working group a very challenging task. So our working group are composed of CSO representatives from around the world, and this working group has also been elected by 2,000 CSO representatives from around the world, right? So then these 8 members of working groups, they gathered together, they did their individual review, and then they finally made decision of 33 proposals which would move to the next stage to be incorporated in the annual meetings of World Bank Group and IMF. So 11 sessions are being hosted at IMF building, and 22 sessions are hosted here at the World Bank CSO Center. So among those, there was our proposal which caught the eye of the working group members immediately. That is the session we are gathered here today. I think first, because of the innovation that this session brought to the table, and also I think for the angle it selected, right? So we definitely, this is all about civil society, but then you need to take or sharpen the focus on what kind of practice you want to bring the conversation. And also, because it's also about the indigenous people, it would bring the voices from the communities, right? So I know Chad has done a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure we actually have a very diversified panel today. So that's why I think for you guys, lesson learned, if you are interested in submitting a proposal for the next CSPF, consider all of these factors, right? Like how innovative your proposal is, how unique it is, how diversified your panel is. So yeah, kudos to you, Chad, and to our friend. I think you want to go by a nickname?
Robbie.
Yes, Robbie. Yes. So we had the first call, and and I was like, okay, yeah, how should I pronounce name? Robbie. Yes, and for Robbie as well. And I think also because when we had our first interaction is when they received the notification, or actually their proposal was selected. So that I think that's also our interesting lesson here is. This is probably your entry point, right, to engaging with the World Bank. So for many of the organizations, you didn't really know much about the World Bank or how it operates or how we engage with CSOs. And then, just think about submitting a CSPO proposal, and now you are here. You are being given the biggest platform of our engagement with civil society organization. So without further ado, I will turn over to Chad to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much. And also Amy. I don't think Amy's here, but you two really did a lot for us and for everybody else who was organizing a session. Thank you to the working group for selecting us, to the World Bank, and to all of you who are joining us today. So this conversation is called Strengthening Civil Society Through Indigenous Mutual Aid Practices. My name is Chad Bissonette. I'm here representing Roots of Development. Roots of Development is a Washington, D.C. based organization that works with Haitian partner organizations and international allies to make aid more effective, equitable, and sustainable in Haiti and around the world. I'm going to read a brief introduction just to kind of set the tone and then quickly start asking our panelists some questions, and then obviously leave some room, hopefully enough room at the end to really have questions and answers and get into some deeper dialogue. Around the world, communities have long relied on systems of mutual aid and solidarity, practices like Combit and Tequio in Mexico. Combit in Haiti, Tequio in Mexico. that bring people together to share labor, knowledge, and resources. These traditions aren't just cultural practices. They're powerful models of community strength, accountability, and local leadership. They play an important role in strengthening communities and civil society, and in turn, whole countries. Today, we are fortunate to hear from 4 remarkable panelists who bring diverse perspectives to the discussion. A Haitian leader who is part of a national movement to reclaim collective strength, build collective memory, and encourage collective action through the adoption of the traditional practice of combit. A Mexican organizer who runs the Community Foundation of Oaxaca, whose 40-plus member groups and the communities they serve organized through the indigenous practice of tequio. An anthropologist and solidarity activist based in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, who advocates for systems and local practices that enable Haitians to control their own narratives and futures. The executive director of the Share Trust, an organization that supports self-help and mutual aid groups around the world by promoting ways to shift power, processes, and funding towards them. Together, their insights will help us critically think about how international institutions, including the World Bank, can recognize, respect, and support indigenous and other types of traditional mutual aid practices as a cornerstone of a strong civil society. In this session, the term indigenous is used in an inclusive and contextually grounded way to describe communities with deep ancestral and cultural ties to place, along with distinct social systems and collective traditions. It also reflects efforts to reclaim and affirm cultural rights rooted in interconnectivity and kinship as acts of agency and self-determination. While one panelist will highlight a mutual aid practice rooted in indigenous tradition, the Haitian example draws on an Afro-Indigenous form of mutual aid, recognizing that the Taino or Arawak peoples are the original indigenous inhabitants of Hispaniola. For this discussion, we use the term broadly and with sensitivity to encompass local, indigenous, and Afro-Indigenous experiences, recognizing that Caribbean heritage is layered and dynamic, shaped both by ancestral continuity and historical migration. Both of these examples demonstrate enduring systems of cooperation and self-determination, offering valuable lessons for strengthening civil society through locally rooted forms of mutual support. So with that, let's dive in and begin our conversation. We're going to start with Luino, as we said, goes by Roby. So Roby, Luino Robillard, Roby, who is the co-founder of Group Combit, the co-organizer of this session. Roby, could you start by just quickly giving us a brief explanation on what is Group Combit and what is the traditional practice of Combit?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, to be here with us. Oh, thank you. Thank you to be here in this very important subject, which make it very, there is hope, because if you imagine 20, 30 years ago, they didn't talk about like mutual aids in this kind of conversations. So what is Combit? You just give a good definition of Combit. We can say Combit is one of the oldest mutual tradition or solidarity way Haitian working together, one of the oldest. And Combit is the way that the Haitian society gathered together to use reciprocity, unity, solidarity to solve their own problem. Now, what is Group Combit, the social movement that we have started? So Combit is like dying in our society. The role of Group Combit is to renew the Combit, because the values and the principle, which is deep in Haitian culture, can really take Haiti where it is today out. So the movement right now, one thing that we are doing, we are documenting combat from every corner in Haiti to see how people practicing combat, what is the values, what are the principles, and bring this into a guide that we call community development guide based on the practical and values of combat. So this is for group combat and combat.
I just want to make sure, maybe I missed this. Did you describe the agricultural practice of kombit? Just to kind of give a context of how this works, why all Haitians know kombit.
So if you go to Haiti, you ask like 100% of Haitian what is kombit. The 100% will say it means solidarity, working together. But the majority of these people will say this is the way that people in the countryside work to farm together, to plant together. But kombit is more than that. Kombit is a philosophy. Kombit is a way of living. So this is the work that we are doing today. Kombit can be effective of course, it's already effective in the countryside, but it could be effective in the urban area. It could be effective in education, in health, in environment. So every Haitian believes that saying kombit only, without do anything, just say kombit, it's already said ensemble nous forts, which is together we are strong in English. So yeah, so it's rooted.
How did the agricultural practice take place? Like what actually happens?
All right, if you go over to the story, Haiti, everybody here know Haiti is the first black country, independent. So that was kombit. It was people from, even when people talk about Africa today, they think like some people even today think Africa is a country. It's a big continent. And they took people all over from mostly in West Africa and people from different languages. The first kombit that Haitian did, our ancestors did in the island, was to found a language, which is Creole today. That was the first kombit. And the second biggest kombit was what we call the Cérémonie Boakaïma. It was a big meeting in 1792. It was a big meeting to see what we're gonna do to change, to liberate this country. That was the second biggest kombit. And then after that, we started to fight for our independence. After Haiti get free, the crisis that you are seeing today, it's been over 200 years. The politicians started to fight for power. And the rest of the population mostly go to live in the mountain, in the countryside. And these people, they are the ones who developed kombit through agriculture. So now what we are doing in the modern days, how we can take the spirit of unity, of dignity, of solidarity, to bring it in all aspects of life of Haitian.
And can you describe how Group Kombit, the national social movement in Haiti, has adapted the traditional practice of kombit and inspired or supported collective action in other tangible forms?
So we will go like to after the earthquake. So I from Cité Soleil, one of the most marginalized places in Haiti, in the heart of Port-au-Prince. So after the earthquake, we saw like international people coming from everywhere come to save Haiti and for Haitian. So one thing that we did, we said, what about we come together as Haitian to help our society, our communities? And this is when we started to ask ourselves, what could we do? Some of us say, let's form an organization. Some of us say NGOs. Some of us say foundation. But we say, what can we build that every single Haitian, even they coming from in the rich part of the country, or they coming from in the poor or countryside or the city, when they hear and they will feel that they're part of it. And we find that it was kombit. And this is when we started to gather the spirit of kombit in Cité Soleil, actually, to bring peace back to our community. And then we find out it works. Actually, in 2018, we launched an initiative named Kombit Bibliothèque Cité Soleil, the Kombit Library, We said we want to build the biggest library in Haiti in the poorest part of the country, which is Cité Soleil, without using the international money and the state money. But the people build your library. And then we put about 6,000 people, we call donors, which is regular people in the community. And we raised about 20,000 books, and we raised about 26 million goods at that time. And then the building is still in Cité Soleil, and then the conflict that you're seeing today is back 2020, and the construction site is closed. So that was like a model. And then people all over the country, like community calling us to say, come teach us how to make combat. And this is when we realized that even us, we don't know what is combat. And then when we launched the group Combat become like a national movement because people have been calling us to do it, we say the first thing we're going to do is to really understand combat from its roots. And since that, it's been 4 years, then we've been working in this guide, the community development guides, which help us identify the principles, the values, the steps. Now, these tools coming from the people, there are about 300 people from all over the country is elaborating this document. Because we can't really just think about something that like a model that we can say, this is Haitian. Everything is imported. Everything is imported. So it's like, so now if we get together to identify what works in the past, and then we can do something that to make it work in the present with the support of what already exists working somewhere else, like Teco in Mexico, like Umuganda in Uganda, for instance. And then I'm glad John, you are working all over the world with community leading their own initiative, which is the model of platform that we are following.
Very good, thank you. I want to switch now to Luis. Luis Ruiz Saucedo is the Director General of the Community Foundation of Oaxaca. Luis, if you could, can you please first tell us a little bit about the Community Foundation of Oaxaca?
Bueno, buenas tardes, un gusto. La Fundación Comunitaria Oaxaca tiene cerca de 30 años de labor. Fuimos la primera fundación comunitaria en México. Es un modelo que viene de Estados Unidos, de Canadá, pero que ahora está en todo el mundo y hace mucho sentido a la forma que tenemos de colaborar nosotros con las comunidades. Nosotros decimos que acompañamos los procesos locales para que las personas ejerzan sus derechos sociales y económicos y acompañar procesos individuales, colectivos y alianzas de los sectores para hacer eso posible. Eso es la fundación. ¿No? Ahora,
now we'll switch for interpretation.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. And first talking about this Community Foundation of Oaxaca. It's been around for 30 years now, and it was the first foundation of this kind in Mexico. It's a model that is being used in the United States and Canada. And now it's used all over the world. But for us, it made a lot of sense with the traditions that we already have in our communities. We call this is supporting local processes for people to reclaim their social and economic rights in a collective way.
And the practice of Tequio. Could you please tell us a little bit more about Tequio, what it is, where it comes from, what form it takes, and what role it plays within communities in Oaxaca?
Y el rol del tequio, ¿nos puede decir qué forma tiene y qué papel juega en las comunidades oaxaqueñas?
sí, el tequio es una práctica prehispánica. Las comunidades zapotecas tienen aproximadamente 3,000 años y es una práctica que ha sobrevivido este tiempo. Son comunidades resilientes que a lo largo de la historia han logrado conservar sus prácticas. Un dato, Oaxaca tiene 570 municipios y 418 de esos se gobiernan por usos y costumbres. Oaxaca tiene una población aproximada de 4,5 millones de personas y 1,5 millones de personas, es decir, cerca del 30%, un poco 33%, tienen esta forma de gobierno.
Yes, Tequio is a pre-Hispanic, resilient way of communities to support each other. It's a practice that is about 3,000 years old. And a piece of data that is interesting, in Oaxaca, we have 570 municipalities, and 418 of them are governed in this way. We have 4.5 million people, and 1.5 million, which is about 33% of that, have this kind of traditional use and customs ways of governing themselves.
El tequio es una forma, es un trabajo donado al bien común. Es un trabajo que es democrático y es colectivo y se ocupa para la comunidad. Por poner un ejemplo, una comunidad decide de todos sus integrantes, 5 días vamos a estar trabajando todos para el bien común, y pueden ser temas de camino o pueden ser temas de medio ambiente o de salud o de ayudar en algo a lo colectivo. Y eso se decide en una asamblea, y entonces la gente tiene posibilidad de decir esto es lo importante para trabajar colectivamente, decidirlo y luego hacerlo. Adicional a lo que haga el gobierno, esto es solo la parte ciudadana.
This traditional way of working is a voluntary work that is for the well-being of the community. It is a collective work that is done, for instance, donating or volunteering 5 days to work for the community. And the way they do it is that there is an assembly that decides where they want to focus this work on. It could be something that has to do like making roads or health or environment or all kinds of different issues that the community may be going through, and that they decide that is a priority. And this way is decided by the assembly, and the people contribute in whatever matter collectively was decided. This is in addition to what the government does. This is done for the citizens, by the citizens.
Y finalmente, esta es la parte colectiva, pero el tequio también permea a un círculo más pequeño, más allá de la familia o los amigos. Cuando tú vas a reconstruir tu casa o tú vas a tener algo que es importante para tu familia, también hay un tequio que es más cercano, y la gente se habitúa a decir, yo voy a ir a dar tequio con tal familia o con tal persona porque lo necesita, y sé que cuando yo lo necesite también va a haber un tequio que regresa hacia mí.
And this is the collective tequio that is done for the entire community, but there is also a smaller kind of tequio that is done within families and friends, and it's kind of a broader spectrum, larger than family and friends, but smaller than the whole community. And this is like, for instance, somebody's building their house. So it's very common to say, okay, I'm going to go give my tequio, I'm going to go volunteer helping this person building their homes, their houses. And you know that whenever you need help, you also have that tequio that is going to be coming your way.
So tequio is at the personal, individual, family level, but it's also at the state level.
Entonces es a nivel personal y comunitario, pero también a nivel estatal.
What are some examples of the activities that have taken place at the state level?
A nivel estatal.
Digamos, a nivel más amplio, hemos tenido digamos, tangibles con algunas contingencias ambientales o sociales, ¿no? O sea, pensamos que en el 2017 vivimos unos sismos que afectaron varios estados del país y uno de ellos fue Oaxaca, en una región. Y lo que significó este reto para todos, desde comunidades que daban su tequio a otras comunidades que fueron afectadas, y que la posibilidad de sumarnos todos y todas hacia lo que era la dificultad de varias comunidades para apoyar a otras comunidades. Entonces lo hace un esfuerzo más amplio, más regional, y que moviliza una cantidad de recursos muy relevante, porque creo que lo que está en esencia es que la participación ciudadana no vista solo como receptores, sino con la potencialidad que existe y con los recursos locales que existen, es uno de los mayores inversionistas. Cuando teníamos ayuda y recursos de fuera, estos eran multiplicados con la labor, el trabajo, pero también con productos de dentro, ¿no? Y un poco lo que se mencionaba, si al gobierno le toma una semana poder reaccionar a una emergencia, a la comunidad le toma horas, y con una práctica eso facilita soluciones y multiplica recursos.
An example of a broader level in a tangible way happen, when there is kind of an emergency that is an environmental or social emergency. In this case, for instance, the earthquakes in 2017, it affected several states in Mexico, including Oaxaca. And the challenge was very important. So in this case, some communities gave the tequio or volunteer help other communities that had been most affected. So the thing is that everybody adds to this effort of resiliency. And what we do is that we support each other in one region, one community supporting other communities within the region. And that way we can multiply the resources. And essentially, the part of this is that citizens are in the position not just of receiving help, but also in contributing to this help. We co-invest in these resources that are local resources. And for instance, in efforts like this, in emergencies, the government takes maybe a week to react or to respond to emergencies. But for us, because we're organized and we have experience, it takes us hours to respond to the needs, and we do it with the local resources.
And very, very quickly, what are some examples of what has been done in those circumstances?
Digamos, otro ejemplo tiene que ver con la pandemia por COVID, y aquí hecho entre fundaciones comunitarias, es decir, cómo llevamos esta lógica de aprender de la sabiduría local y de las buenas prácticas locales, y cómo eso lo compartimos con otros estados que tienen no esta misma tradición, pero sí otras tradiciones de participación ciudadana. Aprendemos todos juntos y entonces accionamos de una forma distinta. Un ejemplo, otra fundación comunitaria en otro estado del país se dio cuenta que cuando sucede alguna contingencia y llega ayuda de fuera, además de los primeros afectados, hay unos segundos afectados, porque llega tanta ayuda de fuera que los productores o los negocios locales luego ya no tienen la posibilidad de vender o de acomodar sus productos porque todo viene de fuera. Entonces, eso pensado en la lógica de Fundación Comunitaria Oaxaca y de Oaxaca, es cuando llega ayuda de fuera, tratemos de que eso nos ayude a comprar los productos de los productores locales. Y entonces la rueda económica y también la del tejido social es más tangible. Cuando tú ves a un vecino que se ocupó de comprarle a la señora que vende el huevo o al que vende el pan, y luego se preocupó de entregarte una canasta que te va a servir en este momento de dificultad, el tejido social se vuelve a entrelazar. Y es el mismo recurso que ocupamos de fuera, que si compráramos todo afuera, llegáramos sin entender la cultura y diéramos eso, porque eso no fortalece el tejido social. Y al revés, la gente después decía, yo tengo plátanos, yo tengo mango, yo tengo naranja, pongamos eso en las despensas de otras comunidades que no tienen esos productos.
So I'm going to give an example of another contingency that we had, the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the way we work with other communities, with other foundations that are from other states, and they don't have the same practices that we do as Ontekio, but we also learn from the local wisdom and the good practices of these communities, because they also have similar practices. And in this other foundation from another state, also they were talking about how when there is an emergency, there is a first effect that is a negative effect, the first victims, but then there is the second victims, which are also the local producers, because if everything is coming from outside, then the local businesses are not able to move their products because everything is coming from the outside. So one way to help is to try to receive the resources that we receive and use them locally. And that way, this financial cycle helps to strengthen the society fabric instead of weakening it. For instance, if somebody, bought some eggs and bread and gave these to people that needed it, that helps to strengthen the society, the resources, because they also are going to invest again into the local people that are selling those products, and this helps to strengthen these. And somebody else may say, I have bananas, I have mangoes, I have oranges, whatever they have, they offer, and to give it to other people in the community that do not have these goods.
Jessica Shu, anthropologist, solidarity activist based in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. We have spoken about Haiti, we've spoken about Mexico. Can you kind of just help us understand other examples of this scope of practices found elsewhere?
Charlie, oh, there it is. You have the map. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here. I really thank you, Ruby and Luis, for sharing about Tekio and Combit. These practices, I've been based in Haiti, so I'm learning about all these other practices globally as we're thinking about advocacy, how we link Haiti to the global. And so I've been involved with Group Combit for about 11 years. And so there was an activity at some point to look at the different practices that resembled Combit. Can you hear me? Is this working? Mm-hmm. Okay. So Chad's put up a map. Of course, this is not a comprehensive map by any means. Courtney just told me there was another practice in Yemen that we didn't know about, so of course there's a lot more of them. But what I have in front of me is about 8 from Latin America and the Caribbean, one of them being Tekio. Another one from Trinidad and Tobago called Gayap, which is primarily used in agricultural settings. And this practice involves community members assisting each other with tasks like harvesting. I have 7 on this map from Africa. One of the examples is from Ghana. It's called Noboa, another communal farming practice where members help each other during critical agricultural periods. 4 in Europe. One is called Mathiel, which is out of Ireland, where neighbors help each other with tasks like farming or construction, and it's rooted in reciprocity and mutual cooperation. 4 in Asia on this map. One of them is called Bayanahan from the Philippines, another traditional form of community help, often symbolized by neighbors physically lifting and moving a house together. In the Middle East and North Africa, there's one called Tawizi out of Morocco, a cooperative work practice among rural Berber communities where people pool their labor for large tasks such as harvesting crops or building homes. And then in Oceania, we have Solevu out of Fiji, a practice where villages unite to work on communal projects like building facilities or farming. And then, yeah, that's where I'll stop. And I'll let Courtney in a little bit talk about self-help and mutual groups that are, you know, I mean, these groups are expansive. We wouldn't be able to put them on a map. But for her to talk a little bit about the work that they're doing to support self-help, mutual aid, solidarity groups, women's groups, et cetera.
Yeah, Courtney Cabot-Venton, founder and executive director of the Share Trust. Again, could you give us just a quick kind of summary of the Share Trust, right? It's work with self-help mutual aid groups. And it's very possible that folks are not familiar with some of these terms, so if you could kind of help us wrap our minds around those, please.
Sure, thanks, and thanks for having me. So I founded the Share Trust. I'm an economist by training, so very comfortable and at home here at the World Bank, and spent most of my career helping bilateral donors figure out the types of interventions that have the biggest impact on poverty reduction and then embedding that at scale in strategy and policy. And I was asked to evaluate a women's self-help group program in Ethiopia about 10 years ago. And completely fell in love with the practice. I came home and looked at the literature because I am a total data nerd, as economists tend to be, and needed to see kind of what the underpinning was in terms of the evidence on impact. And it turned out that these women's groups, which are effectively groups of 15 to 20 women who meet each week. They save, they start small businesses, but much more importantly, they engage in all the practices that we've just been hearing about from our colleagues around supporting each other, finding ways to create change in their communities. And the evidence base was astounding for the types of impact that these groups were having in their communities. Just one small example, there's a meta-analysis of 6 RCTs, randomized control trials in Asia, where they found that just being in a women's group reduced maternal mortality by 37%. And I said, how is this not the headline of every single conference that we have, particularly given that they cost next to nothing? So I set up the Share Trust because I wanted to help support this practice, particularly because in the evidence we saw that it's not just about economic strengthening, that it's actually the social capacities, and the World Bank has actually done some really important studies on this front, showing that social capacities drive change more so than economic capacities in this context. So I was really intrigued by this evidence base. And fast forward, I was pulled in at the start of COVID to help lead FCDO's global COVID response on all social protection and humanitarian cash. And all of my colleagues for years have sort of said, okay, but this is great, but how do we fund grassroots groups at scale? How do we fund agricultural workers and people helping to move each other's houses? Like, what does that look like? And while we were doing the global COVID response, we were actually very closely partnered with the World Bank, helping to deploy very large amounts of cash through social protection, and found that these networks that we see on this map, which would be covered with dots if we mapped all of them, were actually the most important resource that we had to make sure that money that we were getting to the ground was sensitized with the local communities, that we knew where risks were flaring up, that we could mitigate against any violence or unrest when we were throwing large amounts of cash into places like Kinshasa. So started to see that this network of mutual aid, self-help, whatever term you want to put to it, was not only the most impactful work that we could be doing, but was absolutely vital to being able to deliver assistance at scale.
Can you talk a little bit more about your research on localization in economic terms? What does it say about directing resources towards these practices? What does it say about the costs, or perhaps better said, the savings of localizing aid?
Sure. So as a result of all of that work at FCDO, I really wanted to start to figure out how to unpack and understand better the impact of working through local actors as we were trying in these 40 country offices to figure out how to get more resources directly to the ground. and stumbled across a whole bunch of data that I didn't know existed. We put together an economic analysis of what it would look like to localize aid. This was 4 years ago, the first global study. It's called Passing the Buck. We were able to determine that if we redeployed funds through local intermediaries instead of INGOs in the UN, that we would realize a 32% cost efficiency. And that is not because local actors were cheaper or we were going to give them less. The study actually models an equitable transfer of resources to local partners. We then were given the opportunity to ground truth that study. It ended up in 3 congressional testimonies and in The Economist, and we were given the opportunity to ground truth it in 4 countries, 2 FCDO countries in the Middle East. And rather unbelievably and very graciously, UN OCHA opened up all of their data to us in Ukraine and Nigeria so that we could replicate those studies there. We found really similar cost efficiencies. They were less than the 32%, but only because the pooled funds tend to have less levels of pass-through. But they were still very significant, upwards of 18%. But most importantly, this year, literally just a few weeks ago, we did an initial analysis. The Sudan Pooled Fund, which is now the world's largest humanitarian crisis, also gave us all of their data. And they have been channeling $25 million this year to mutual aid groups in Sudan. You may have read or heard about them because there's been a fair bit of publicity about the emergency response rooms that literally have been the frontline responders setting up community kitchens and providing other life-saving aid in Sudan because it's so hard to get anywhere. So we're also starting to see this emergence of not only a more cost-efficient way of doing this work, but also actually being able to transfer large amounts of sums at scale to tiny grassroots groups through a UN mechanism, which is fairly novel and pretty exciting.
Roby, would you could you kind of put into context a little bit what role does, can, should mutual aid efforts play in a country's development? Courtney spoke about it in general. She focused in on humanitarian activities. How has Group Combit, for example, engaged in, supported, encouraged, reinforced, true development in Haiti?
Before you even answer this question, is to think around first what role charity, dependency, outside, top-down plans can play in a country development. And then we can back to say, if you want to develop a country, it has to come from within the community first, and with developing partnership, good partnership, to support the development. So Haiti has been struggling for a good, since we are independent. We've been trying everything. Friends coming from all over come to support Haiti, to help Haiti, how to save Haiti for Haitian. And it's not working. So we think now it's time to try Haitian, to try themselves, to see what was working in the past, how this country come together to form a nation. And this is the kind of question we've been asking ourselves. And we find out that Haiti has a lot of strength. Haiti has a lot of resources. Haitians themselves, they are the resources of Haiti. Now is to, after they identify themselves, how to organize themselves in their community and to go up. Like, I'm so glad to hear it's not happening only in the community itself. If you see in Mexico, now they are talking about region, like the local mayor. So if we can go from the community to the municipality, region, and then to find like good leaders who can be president, senator, deputy, to think for the country, to use the mutual aid as the response, as the answer for the country, because we can't develop not only Haiti, the world with just charity, by pity, but it's by combat, it's by the mutual aid, the way that the local organize themselves. And as we said in Haiti, it's like a chain, it's broke, but all the pieces exist. They are in the Haiti. It's the Haitians. So now it's time to build trust back, to build the people before even think of building the country, the physical country. Build the people, the mindset of the people. And they can do it. We are living it in very small level now. For instance, I don't know if you heard about like a farmers like canal in Haiti. The last 2 years, like Haitian build a canal, which could be nothing for someone else in another context, but in Haiti, when you say that, it really means something. The government can't build a canal to irrigate like a 3,000 hectares of land, because the canal is divided Dominican Republic and Haiti. And Dominican Republic doesn't want this canal to build in Haiti because they are selling Haiti goods, and which is normal because they are protecting the economy. But our diplomacy is not strong enough to discuss with the Dominican Republic to build the canal. And the Haitians said, we will do it. And they took 24 months to build their own canals with their own money. It's an example. If we want to do something, we can do it as people. As we said, everybody knows that people have the power. And Haitian, they are the power of Haiti.
And, we won't have time to get into all of the different activities that take place in Haiti, that take place in Mexico, that are born out of these systems. But I encourage you to look up more about Group Combit and a particular program that they have, that they created and support. It's called CIME Semence. Combit. And that is another, you would say, these are kind of technical sounding terms. I don't know if it's necessarily like that, but they are mechanisms for a combination of encouraging local resources, local activities that are already taking place, and then combining them with external resources in order to encourage everything from infrastructure projects to education projects to all sorts of kind of traditional, typical sector type of projects from happening, and from more of those taking place in Haiti. I want to go back to you, Jess, and in your work in Haiti, your lived experiences in Haiti, can you give us just at least a little bit of insight, because there's so much to this, but of what happens when local groups, local resources are bypassed? How does overlooking or under-supporting the collective strengths within communities, within countries, affect development outcomes?
Sure. I might actually refer back to Group Combit and its inception. So Group Combit started in Cité Soleil, as Roby was talking about, and it was called Combit Soleil Levé at the time, Collective of the Rising Sun. And it was actually born in direct response to a lot of the aid that was coming in after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. And so what was happening was there's cash for work that was being paid to different members of communities to clean their neighborhoods. And what we would see over and over again was that these communities were not getting clean. And in direct response, social leaders out of certain neighborhoods said, well, I live here. I don't want to live in this. I want my neighborhood to be clean. And they started to clean the streets. Roby, please correct me if this history is off. So people started to clean. It started in a neighborhood and it became contagious. But it was also like, we live in these places. We have the resources, we have the people, we have the tools, we have the know-how. And this became contagious and formed into a movement that was what we see now, a national one. And I have had the privilege of being a friend when they invite me to do things. They let me hang out, let's just say. But what I've witnessed in this process of reclaiming, adapting Combit into an urban area is not just the collective action. It's a process of healing. It's a process of transformation. It's a process of, there's a divide in Haiti between the rural and the urban. It's asking questions of what is this divide? How do we heal? How do we build a social contract? These are the things that I witness. Haitians are always going to be the first and last responders as well. I lived in the far end of the island before I came to the big city. And I always say that my relationships determine the work that I do. So I was living in Abrico, which is a commune on the far end of the island, probably the farthest point from Port-au-Prince. And in 2016, Hurricane Matthew hit, practically destroying the community. I was able to get a ride on a boat. I was the first person that was not from Abrico, whether Haitian or foreign, to enter into it. And what I saw was communities sharing machetes. Tools had been lost to clean the center of town, to clean each other's houses, to help each other, to bring food into the countryside further in. All these collective practices of collective care, of mutual aid, of solidarity that existed. And, the community was like, okay, at some point, we're going to have these NGOs come in and provide us support, because we do need some support, although we have all these local resources. A social leader mobilized with all the institutions, did a comprehensive assessment of the entire commune, 40,000 people, door to door, something the state hasn't done in years. It was done locally by social leaders mobilizing the institutions of this town. And so they went door to door, marking the needs, but not just the needs, the resources of every single community. And as allies, we injected this into OCHA, shared it with international NGOs, and what came did not match at all what people needed. And what we saw in response to this was competition between neighbors who had been helping each other in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, of the hurricane. We watched competition build. We watched boats come in with aid that had no transparency. It was just a distribution, right? And we watched some of the people in the center of the town sell it to people that were more in need, creating these divisions in the social fabric. These are the repercussions of ineffective aid. We can also say, if we're talking about Indigenous practices, a lot of these are born out of place, right? Born out of, if we talk specifically about indigeneity, it's tied to land, right? So for a system that's born out of that to be disrupted by an external system that has no knowledge of that reality is messy. That's the gentlest way to put it. So I can stop there. These are some of the things that we witness. I mean, I can cite these over and over and over again, and community members have more experience with this and could cite this over and over and over again.
So let's get a little bit more into kind of the role of international institutions, right? We're here at the World Bank. Any external organization, really, right? Whether it be national or international, how should they engage with these practices? How do we avoid the risk of international foreign institutions co-opting or simply weakening these practices, right? While still engaging and offering their support. Courtney, we're here at the World Bank. What are the ways, various forms you've found in your research and your experiences, various forms in which groups practicing mutual aid are organizing to scale and providing alternatives to externally imposed development models? Maybe specifically, you could talk about intermediaries, kind of the ways in which those come about, the ways that they're used, what some look like, what others look like.
Yeah, sure. I can think of a lot of ways to answer this question, but it's a really delicate balance, because these practices, if you come in and try to sort of put them in a log frame and institutionalize them, that does not work. If you try to scale them too quickly, you break down the bonds of trust. It's not something that you can just kind of, and I've seen the World Bank and others come into certain countries, Gates Foundation, lots of people genuinely because they're so bought into the process, but say, okay, we're going to set up 50,000 groups overnight, and it's like, well, no, it doesn't work that way. So it's delicate, but a couple of ways where I have seen it work quite successfully. So one is going back to helping to redeploy World Bank funds through social protection mechanisms through government during the COVID response. And the World Bank is one of the largest funders of social protection globally, if not the largest. One of the things that we would find as FCDO, as a partner with the World Bank going into multi-donor trust funds, was that we were all deeply concerned about making sure that the money didn't just go to government, but that there was always a social contract with civil society. And so one of the ways that I saw these groups emerging in a more formalized way without corrupting their processes was actually acting as networks that the government could work with to be able to sensitize communities around what were their rights, what should they be accessing, how do they access that. So for example, BISP is the Pakistan largest social protection program, I believe, globally. And they were really working through these community groups to be able to make sure that all communities in the country understood what their rights were under social protection. So that was one really interesting mechanism. The second is that in Sudan, they're actually treating the funds that are being distributed to these frontline groups for their community kitchens and other activities as cash transfers, which means that there's no reporting, compliance. They simply give like a half-page to a one-page report on what they used the funds for. And this is also something that the World Bank has done quite a lot of through their community investment programs over the years, and also some of the other development banks, Caribbean Development Bank and others, to really deploy funds to local groups without, again, corrupting them. So I think the question of the intermediary is a bit of a tricky one because it's not always clear who is the best intermediary to channel those funds. But I think one of the things that compels me about the UN OCHA pooled fund, in that case with the UN as an intermediary, which is not something I'd always advocate for, but in this instance, they're deploying those funds as an intermediary, as cash transfers, without having to impose all of their rules and regulations and restrictions on supporting these local networks, which is quite compelling as an alternative way of getting funding out to these networks.
Yeah, now we're about to open up for kind of just, some questions and answers and get into a little bit more detail about what we've been speaking about. But Luis, if you could... Okay, I want to make sure you caught up there. Luis, can you offer from what you live, what you do for work, what you understand, what recommendations can you offer institution like the World Bank and or really any external international or national organization that is interested in understanding the ways that it can engage with these systems, with these practices, with this type of work?
Bien, aquí está. 3 recomendaciones, ¿no? La primera es tomarse el tiempo para co-crear la colaboración. Sí debe de haber un momento de preparación de lo que vamos a hacer juntos, ya sea con los gobiernos o con los gobiernos y la sociedad civil, pero sí debe de haber un momento de co-creación. Lo que inviertas en ese tiempo de co-crear te va a significar en resultados, en entendimiento, en evolucionar. Yo creo que uno de los mayores retos que tenemos desde todos los sectores, ya sea las agencias de cooperación, el Banco Mundial, las organizaciones, los gobiernos, sí es un cambio cultural. Sí, la actualidad nos reta a un cambio cultural que tiene que ver con esto. Entonces, la primera es la co-creación. Y hay que equilibrar entre la confianza de con quienes vas a colaborar con el fortalecimiento del actor con el que vas a colaborar. Porque en muchos de los países, y en México, ese actor con el que vas a colaborar tiene necesidades de fortalecimiento. No es un colaborador ideal, hay que trabajar eso. Y reconocerlo te va a ayudar a la respuesta. Hay que... Me quedan dos más. ¿Quieres lo...? Sí, y yo ahorita.
Yeah, so I would give 3 recommendations. The first recommendation is to take the time to co-create, to take the time to collaborate and to prepare so that you can co-create together with the government and with the civil society, because this time that you take to co-create is going to mean a lot when you're looking for results, to work together, to evolve, because this also means that many times this goes for organizations and for agencies, cooperation agencies, that there's got to be a cultural change in this to find the balance. It's not only trusting on the actors that you're going to be working with, but it's also strengthening, because in this collaboration, you're going to find in many countries, or in Mexico in this case, that the actors are not perfect. You know, they have to be strengthened. They're not ideal. So we have to recognize that you have to work together in this. This is the first recommendation.
La segunda recomendación sería, fíjense, cuando hablamos ahora de la huella de carbón, ¿no? Cuando hacemos un viaje decimos, nosotros dejamos una huella de carbono y ya lo tenemos conceptualizado. Y sabemos que esa huella de carbono implica una responsabilidad e implica labores para compensar eso. Entonces hay que trabajar con bosques, hay que haber, o sea, esa captura de carbono. Algo muy similar con la huella que deja la cooperación internacional o la intervención desde estas agencias de cooperación. Cuando llegan estos grandes proyectos de las agencias de cooperación, llegan con grandes recursos y, claro, la posibilidad de hacer muchas cosas. Pero la pregunta es, ¿qué sucede cuando se retiran esos esfuerzos con esos recursos? Porque si no prevés eso, el péndulo desde luego que se movió a favor, pero cuando te vas, si no generaste las condiciones para que eso prevalezca, el péndulo regresa. Y hay dificultades con tu operador, con quien fue el intermediario, con quienes fueron las comunidades, porque en todos los proyectos la realidad no se mueve tanto con los tiempos de los proyectos. Hay que dejar habilidades, capacidades y la sostenibilidad. Pensar en eso va a posibilitar que el resultado se sostenga para todos y sea más benéfico para el entorno. Esa es la segunda.
So the other part, the second recommendation, is like to think like when we think about our carbon trace that we leave. This is a concept that we already know, you know, that how it affects when we are talking about the forest and, you know, the capturing the carbon, you know, this is already known internationally and the agencies understand this concept already. But when they have large agencies coming with larger resources, and it advances, but what happens when these resources are withdrawn? You know, you can move the pendulum in a good favor, in favor of these concerns, but when they leave, if you didn't build, if you didn't lift it up in a way that you build resilience, you build skills, you build true agency, then that is going to go back to where it was before. So projects move faster than reality. So you need to leave behind, you know, skills and capacity so that these systems and the results are sustainable in the future.
Nada más como apunte, cuando nosotros vemos a una organización que está operando un proyecto junto con una agencia de cooperación y sabemos que ese proyecto va a durar 5 o 6 años, nos estamos preparando para que en su año 7 tenemos que apoyar a esa organización porque si no se va a caer, porque con el apoyo, desde luego que tiene un personal calificado, amplio y una posibilidad de hacer cosas. Pero cuando eso se quita, entonces hay que ayudarla con actores locales a que eso se sostenga. Eso es el apunte nada más, pero y falta la tercera, ¿no?
And a note on that, and this is part of the second one also, that when an organization comes and is working with a corporate, a large organization or an agency that has a project that is going to last 5 or 6 years, we need to be prepared that for the 7th year, we're going to have to support that organization. Otherwise, the work that is being done all these years is going to fall through. So these organizations come with skilled staff and broad resources, but when they leave, we are supposed to have local actors that are able to continue that work. And now we'll go to the third concept or recommendation.
Un poco rápido, por favor.
Rapidísimo. La última, aprovechar la capacidad de convocatoria que tienen las agencias de cooperación, incluido el Banco Mundial. Y platicaba con Chad, la semana pasada hubo una reunión en Oaxaca convocado por el Banco Mundial porque el gobierno es el principal comprador del país y quieren democratizar las compras de gobierno y quieren empezar con el café. En esa reunión estuvieron todos, porque va el gobierno del estado, porque va el gobierno federal, porque van los empresarios, porque vamos las organizaciones. Ese poder de convocatoria con la visión de participación de todos los sectores puede ayudar, convocar y dejar vinculaciones y colaboraciones también en el territorio, y también eso es relevante.
And the last one, very quickly, is very important to take advantage of when, big organizations like the World Bank, for instance, to take advantage of the power that they have to gather people, to reunite people. Like in Oaxaca, just recently, I was telling Chad about this. They're the main buyer, right? So everybody goes when these big organizations have an event because the government goes. In this case, they want to democratize coffee, and everybody goes: the state government, the federal government, the companies, the entrepreneurs, the organizations. We are there. Everybody's there. So let's take advantage of that ability to bring everybody together, to share visions, and to create links in the sector so that they can continue working and collaborating together.
Just before we open for questions, I just want to point out and thank Sandra. This is Sandra Tapia of Latin Matters. I don't know if you can see it from this angle, but the notes she takes when Luis is speaking and then goes through those again in the way that she does is pretty extraordinary. Sandra, I know this is your job, and that's nothing for you, but that's quite impressive. All right, let's get into some questions here. Please, don't be shy. Ready for you, please, John. Is it on? I don't know if it needs to be turned on.
Yeah, now it's on. So I have a question for Courtney. Talking about social capacity. It's probably not a term anybody but you in this room could define. My friend Vinya Ariratne is here, whose organization has 15,000 villages operating on these same principles in Sri Lanka. They use the mantra, we build the road and the road builds us, which I think points to what you were talking about in social capacity. So, and I know Booker T. Washington built a university by having students build it themselves. So this is like a universal thing that keeps being forgotten. So could you just define it a little more clearly, what you meant when you said the study showed social capacity?
If you could actually, John, I don't think this is John Coonrod with the Movement for Community-Led Development. Worth knowing kind of some of the network that we have in the room here. I want to try something I've seen. I want to just do 2 or 3 questions quickly so we can and then we'll address it. We'll take notes and try to get a few done. Who else has a question?
To your left.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wanjiko from Gulf Plus. I find this concept of, practice of mutual aid really interesting and fascinating. And as you might have known in whatever has been happening in the world, is that there's been tracking back of funding and things like that for marginalized communities. And I find it interesting that we talk about institutions like World Bank, and when we're getting funds we partner with governments. But my question would be, how do we scale this in context, for example, like in Kenya, where we have a very thin line of trust and faith in what the government can do, and getting into what the communities in Kenya are doing at the moment?
So question of scale, especially as it relates to its relationship with national governments.
And trust.
And lack of trust at times. We'll take, okay, sure, yeah, thank you, Charlie, thanks. My colleague Charlie does this. One more, we'll take one more, and then we'll get into these.
Hi, I'm Carla from the OECD. You know very well we've been working a lot on issues of locally led development, and I just wanted to build from the question on the role of intermediaries and the role of international organizations, and this question about trust as well, where there's a lack of trust in the local communities, but also from the provider side, where what we see from the OECD side as well, from big providers of aid, where many countries do believe in locally led development, but they also have the challenge of being accountable to their local audiences, and a challenge of the accountability that comes within, and how, you know, countries can also work to build that trust within their countries. So that narrative side of it, to make sure that, for example, you were talking about the cash transfers, those examples on the humanitarian side, to build those examples and those systems for development practices in the long term. I think it can be challenging. So if you have some ideas on that, would be great.
All right, you want to tackle, Courtney, do you want to tackle social capacity?
Yeah, I can do social capacity and also Carla's question briefly. So on social capacities, I mean, this is part of why people don't study them, because they're really hard to define, right? And so there are lots of people who are developing, you know, in the same way as we have poverty indicators with 267 odd indicators. There's more than that you could look at for social capacities. But some of the ways that I've seen that addressed, for example, are one of the studies that I found most interesting is the World Bank looked at graduation programs in the Sahel and used an RCT to look at what if you provided self-help groups with just cash, what if you provided them with cash and mentoring, which is where the groups actually meet together, they have a mentor, they build their social networks. So that was like the social side of it. And then the third arm also added in economic strengthening, providing livestock assets and also a savings group component. And they found that the arm that only had the financial strengthening piece, that last bit, had a negative return on investment. The piece that had the mentoring and none of the economic injection had the positive return on investment. And so the overall graduation model looked like it had a high return on investment, but it was the social that was pulling it up and the financial strengthening that was pulling it down. So I think people have started to tease out some of the other literature that I have seen, which actually comes from a lot of like seminal psychology studies from the 1960s, actually shows that your social networks are fundamentally influencing on what you think you can do. So the way you change your mental model to believe that you can create change is by working with other people who you see convince you that you can do more. So there's a really fascinating study in Ethiopia called The Future in Mind, which was undertaken by a guy called Stefan Durkon, who was the chief economist at FCDO for a long time. He now runs the Mind and Behavior Institute at Oxford University. He looked at showing groups of people in Ethiopia a 1-hour video, 4 segments of people in local communities who faced similar challenges to them, who had found their ways out of poverty. A 1-hour video of how 4 other people had worked their way out of poverty. And they ran an RCT on it. After 6 months, they found huge changes in poverty levels, in education, and how many people were sending their kids to school because they believed that they could do more because they saw that other people were. That's a social capacity that comes through peer support. 5 years later, they went back and retested the RCT and found those effects were persisting from a 1-hour aspirational video. So I think there are like creative ways that people are seeing how to actually understand what it looks like to strengthen social capacities. And it's really worth digging into because it's very profound in very creative ways. And then just in terms of the accountability for donors with their taxpayers, I have said so many times, particularly when I was helping with the FCDO Global COVID response, their donors want to do localization, but they're all terrified because they are under so much pressure from their taxpayers for how are they spending taxpayer dollars. And it's not because they're trying to evade funding local actors. It's because they're scared that if they push too far, that the Daily Mail and the alt-right are going to push so hard back that aid is withdrawn. That's what I was saying on repeat 5 years ago. Look at what happened in the last 6 months, right? So it comes from a genuine concern. The best ways I have found to counteract that, and if anybody wants, here are the 2-pagers from our studies, but is to give evidence, really rock-solid evidence, that this is a cost-efficient way to spend taxpayer dollars, that it is a wise use of taxpayer dollars. For me, that's been the most effective way to address that.
Luis, would you be open to talking about scale? You talked about, Oaxaca is a state in Mexico. It's got a large population. Almost all of the counties within it not only participate in these types of activities, practice these practices, but the structure and system is built on it and around it. Could you talk to the attendees' question about kind of scale, working with national governments, lack of trust between citizens, civil society, national governments? Did I capture that correctly?
Sí, Oaxaca es uno de los estados con mayores condiciones de marginación. Es un estado contrastante. Es el estado con la mayor biodiversidad en el país y al mismo tiempo las comunidades están en condiciones de marginación. Y a lo largo de los años la acción de gobierno ha sido o nula o muy escasa. ¿Cómo desde lo que estamos haciendo contribuimos a la confianza y al trabajo? Es desde esta lógica desde la comunidad. Y un ejemplo, ¿no? Hicimos un aprovechamiento de resina de pino, ya están los bosques, y junto con la comunidad aprovechamos resina de pino. Generamos cerca de 1,000 empleos en la montaña. Y cuando eso lo platicábamos con el gobierno decía, no puedo creer que eso esté pasando en la montaña porque ahí son complicados y tienen problemas de límites de territorio y cierran las carreteras, ¿no? Y del otro lado con la comunidad les decíamos, hay tiempo para todo y hay que mostrar que esto que estamos haciendo aquí en la montaña está generando empleos, está mejorando ingresos y permite una posibilidad de gobernanza. Cuando hicimos eso, el gobierno se acercó y también los comuneros y pudimos hacer políticas de vivienda, políticas de electrificación y generar empleos que venían desde agencias de cooperación, las inversiones, fundaciones empresariales y la labor de Fundación Comunitaria Oaxaca. O sea, creo que hay muchas razones para explicarnos por qué la desconfianza, y hay mucho trabajo que hacer para avanzar en por lo menos modelos básicos de cooperación.
Yes, I would like to tell you how in Oaxaca is a large state, and is a state with a lot of contrast in Mexico. There is the community. A lot of the communities are very marginalized, even though this is a state with the largest biodiversity in the country. And however, the communities are marginalized. And so what we have been doing 1 year, what we work with the government, the action of the government is missing, or sometimes is very, very scarce. So what we work and to show how to scale this work with the government, and especially with the lack of trust, or the lack of mutual trust with the government, is that we had this project of resin, of the pine resins in the mountains. So the pines are already there. So we organized with the communities, and we generated 1,000 employments in the mountains. And the government couldn't believe that. They said, like, no, I don't believe you can do that in the mountains, because there is a lot of problems in the mountains. Those communities are very complex and very complicated, and they have a lot of problems with limiting their territory. They close the roads. It's very difficult to work with them. And we showed them that this could be done. And we generated employments, and we generated revenues. And we showed them how we can work together with that. And we then work together in policies of housing, electricity, employment, and cooperation. And we have been doing this with different organizations, corporations, organizations, foundations, and with the Oaxaca organization of Foundation for Communities. And this is to help us to show how these resources, we can work through these working in projects, and how the resources can be used in a way that we can produce a mutual trust.
So, you know, community-based organizations, civil society, community foundations do what you do best, and show the government the results, the impact. Give them something that they are interested in. It sounds, it's coming from Roby. You all scaled, Group Combit scaled. You talked about its origins in Cité Soleil. It was basically Cité Soleil, and then the movement went national. So you all scaled your relationship with the Haitian government. I know enough to know it's challenging. There are many challenges being, you know, the Haitian government faces right now. Where have you found opportunities? Who have you been able to engage with, either past government officials, current government officials? You know, where do you see opportunities to bridge that gap, to make these connections?
Yeah, your question about Kenya, I think you still have like an unelected one, so you are lucky. We don't have one in Haiti. It's been many years now. We don't have one. So
You mean elected?
Elected.
Yeah, you have elected officials. Haiti right now, unfortunately, doesn't really have elected officials.
Yeah. So I think this question already answered. It's building trust. We have to ask questions. Why there is mistrust? Why our elected leaders are corrupt? So just why? And this is the questions we've been asking in Haiti. And it's been like not one government. It's all of them. So why? And this is where we get to what we call system. What lack in this system, what we should change to really find people, not robot, not people just like doing the work just because they elected. They are doing the work for themselves, for their family, for their country. So this is where I think the question with how the international organization can be involved. You know, a country is not one-time project. community is not one-time project. It's a process. It's a long process. If you see something like the earthquake hit Haiti and you go there, you just give some bag of rice. It's good for the moment, but that's not going to change Haiti. So it's a long process, and we need more than just charity to change that. We need solidarity. We need friendship. The friends that I find working in Haiti, like international, like what keep them, it's not project. It's the relationship they are building with Haiti. They feel it with the community. So Chad see himself as someone coming from Lagonave. Lagonave is an island in Haiti. Because he used to live with people there, and he feel it. And now it's deep to him. It's more just like what I can give you as money. Money can't change, I don't know for your country, but money can't change my country. It's not money. It's really Haitian and real solidarity, which can change Haiti. So trusting is not giving, it's building. So for now, we are starting to build a new generation of leaders. And these people, they should come in from what we call in Haiti, in Haitian Vodou, they call that lakou. Lakou is like a yard. So everyone used to come from a lakou, like you coming from a family. In the past, when you do something wrong, they ask two questions. Who is your family? Where did you went to school? These two questions they ask you, because they were so fundamental to find who you are. So we think that we have to really build community, schools, families, and this is how we can build trust and to get good people to get to our government to change them. But the tree is there, it's dead, but it's still, we have to figure out a way to work with them, but start with the little one.
The roots.
The roots.
That was good. That was very good. I did not. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Luis. This was a journey, a trip to get here. Roby, Courtney, and Jess for taking the time, the preparation, everything it takes to kind of to do what you do, to participate in this. Thank you, Lee. Thank you to the World Bank. Thank you, all of you, for participating in this. We hope that, obviously, like all of these sessions and panels should be, they should be pieces of something bigger, right? And a conversation and a discussion and work that continues together. I hope today's discussion reminds us, whether we're working within global institutions or alongside communities, that lasting progress begins by recognizing and investing in the collective strength that already exists in the populations we serve. As we leave this session, let's carry forward the understanding that practices like Kombit and Tekio aren't just traditions of the past, they're blueprints for building a stronger, more engaged, and productive civil society. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. So this is our last session of the day in this room. And we also have a happy hour from 5-7 in grocery, which is, I think, 2 blocks down the road. If you haven't received the invitation in your inbox, the poster is outside. So take a picture of that so you can find the right location. Okay, thank you again, Chad, and this is a great session. Thank you. And we were also being live streaming this session, and the recording would be posted online in 2 days.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.